Hey folks, Wilbur Good Speed here. Today we're going to replace the strut on a Ford Taurus. It's a '02 model. I did the rear struts last week and now I'm tackling the front struts. It's not that bad of a job. There's a few little hiccups that you'll see, but overall this is something that if you got a decent skill set on the mechanical side, you'll probably be able to do this. I'm not a mechanic, and I did the other side, but I wanted to go through it first to make sure that I knew exactly what I was doing. So we're going to film this side. Obviously, I've taken the tire off. I'm not going to show that. Everybody knows how to take a tire off. I've also sprayed down this morning early all of the nuts and bolts, and this area where the knuckle grabs the actual strut, I soaked it real good in PB Blaster, and you can use whatever you want, some kind of penetrant, and that just helps things come off a little better. We are going to be replacing the factory, I guess this is a sway linkage. I'm not really sure what it's called, but this one, if you'll look right here, has a plastic one, and it's a piece of garbage. So we're going to put a good metal one on. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing you're going to need is well, I need to get my glasses first thing. You're going to need a 10 millimeter. A 10 millimeter bolt holds this brake line right here, and we're going to pop that dude out. This is a little self-tapping 10 millimeter. And it's like that with a new strut. It's going to have to make its own threads going back in. Works really good. I didn't have any issues with that. Let's set that to the side. That frees up the brake line. The ABS sensor cord, it's just on here it's just clipped on here. So you just wiggle it around until you can pull it off like that. All right, now that we've got these two things out of our way, the next thing is we're going to be removing this. You'll see right in here, this is a 19, I believe. I'll verify when I get the wrench on it. But this is this holds the knuckle to the strut, and we're going to be removing this nut and removing this bolt. This bolt comes out, and that will relieve the tension on the actual strut. Yeah, it's a 21 millimeters what you need. It's pretty tight. I'm just gonna get it broke loose like this. A few turns. Now I'm gonna switch over to my ratchet. All right, the other end should hold itself. It's got a little bracket on it, welded to it. So it'll turn a couple of times, and then that little L piece will hold the bolt in, and you just spin the nut right off. Pre-soaking all of this with that PB Blaster, or whatever you prefer, it doesn't matter, as long as there's some kind of penetrant. It really makes a difference in getting all of this off. So there's our nut. Again, 21 millimeter. Takes that off. Now we should be able to just slide this out. And there's our bolt. And there's that little welded on little bracket I was talking about. It catches the actual knuckle and won't let that spin. Just gonna thread that back on so we don't lose it. Now, If you got an air hammer, it's a good time to just clear this out of the way and put the air hammer on this knuckle, and you can just drive it right off. But before we do that, this being a Ford, we have the subframe has two 18mm bolts, and I'm fixing to go under, and I'll grab the camera and show you what they look like. There's a plastic fairing underneath here. Hopefully you can see that. I'm not taking that off. I'm doing a shortcut. I have a hole saw, and I'm going to cut a hole in here so I can get to that 18mm bolt. It's an old car, so I'm not really worried about cutting a little 2.5-inch hole there. You can cut a smaller hole if you need to. You just got to be able to get an 18mm socket up through there on your impact wrench. So I'm doing this because if we don't drop the subframe, this mechanism here, all of this rotor and everything, it will not drop low enough to get the strut out. So we're going to drop the subframe a couple of inches. We're not taking the bolts all the way out. We're just going to thread them out a couple of inches. There's one in the rear and one in the front, which I'll show you when I get under here. We're going to thread those out, and then that will allow the subframe to drop down enough so the rest of this will drop down, and you can clear the bottom of the strut out of the top of the knuckle. So first of all, I'm going to drill me a hole here. This is the bolt we're trying to get to. Move this hose out of your way when you drill. I can't get to that if you go under it. I can't get to that without putting me a hole. I'm going to put a hole right here, and I'll move the hose so I don't hit that hose. See, it'll move out of the way. And then I can run my socket right up through here. Otherwise, it's taking out lots and lots of little screws here, and they're lined all around through here. Because it's not a newer car, I'm going to simplify, and I'm just going to put me a little hole right here. I'm going to hold this hose out of the way. Now the rear, there's nothing in the way of the rear one. So our next step is get the, cut that port out like a dying turtle. All right, so we got our impact wrench on this 18mm subframe bolt. You can see the subframe dropping down. See it dropping? Now, we've got her loosened up. That's all you need to do. Don't take it all the way out. Okay, there's our second subframe bolt. It's toward the rear. I'll give you an idea. Right there's the hub and everything, rotor. So it's just behind the rotor, slightly back from the rotor. And we're fixing to loosen it off. We're not taking it all the way out. We're just going to loosen it off. All right, so by loosening this off, we've created a gap, about a 2-inch gap. All of this lowered down as we loosen this 18mm bolt on the subframe. By doing all of that, we lowered this, and that's going to allow this to drop down further. And it'll be just enough to get the strut out of the knuckle. If you don't drop this down, you won't get that out. Okay, my air hammer broke, and I'm waiting on a replacement, so I'm going old school here. What you need to do, come in and get this. Get your hoses out of the way. Get you a bar right here. Get you a shop hammer. And all you gotta do is start tapping that down. You see it dropping? Yeah, we can get her out now. So you see right here, I guess it's A-arm, sway arm, A-arm. I'm not sure what it's called, but you know what I'm talking about. It's bottomed out here on this subframe. If this subframe was up here where it was supposed to be, tightened in, you'd never get it to drop enough to be able to do this. So now, we're just gonna try to work this off. We need to take this sway bar linkage out. Then we'll be able to pull this on off of here. Up here is 3 13mm nuts. Don't touch this one in the middle. There's no point in it. If you take that off, bad things can happen. People get hurt. Leave that alone. That's all holding all that spring tension in. There's no need to touch that. You just want to do these 3 with 13mm when we're ready to pull it out. But for now, we're going to work to get this sway arm off. All right. This is going to spin when we put our ratchet on this. This is going to spin inside of there. That's why they have. You can get, I think it's 8mm will hold this. Now, some ratchets have a hole through them where you can do that. Let's see what, I'm going to see what I can come up with here. First thing I'm going to do is get my size right. So to get this sway bar linkage off right here, 18mm, we're going to try and see if it will I've already got an 18 on here, so same difference, 18. We're going to see what we got. Very lucky it came off. We didn't have to hold the end of this, but if this started spinning, you can get you a wrench on that bolt and hold this with another wrench, 8mm, and you can keep it from spinning. We got lucky. So now I'm just going to tap that out. It's in a hole. It's in a bracket on the back side of the strut. Okay, what's happening is we've got downward pressure on it, and that's making it catch and not come on out. I can get it out by jacking this back up a little bit. So let me get my jack. So we're putting the jack back here under this A-arm, and just going to try to pick up and get some tension off of that. There we go. We got it out. You know, in hindsight, it probably would have been better just to take this off before we did this. So, and that way it wouldn't, I don't think it would be in a bind. Now let's let this back down. Okay. Now we should be able to remove our strut once we take the top 3 nuts off. And again, that's 13mm. All right. There's no need to keep these 3 nuts. The new strut assembly comes with those. All right, our strut is free. Now we just have to negotiate it out of here. Keep in mind how your hoses are, your lines and hoses. What you don't want to do is get them, when you go put the new strut back in, you don't want these lines in behind it. So just remember, they go out front like that and they cross over. It's always good to take a picture of what it looks like before you disassemble it. That way, right before you get ready to put it back together, review your picture, and that way you know you get everything right. Because it's going to be a lot of work getting this strut back into this knuckle, and you don't want to find out, oh crap, I let it catch the line and the line's behind it. I mean, that's just, you'll have to redo it. Try not to put a lot of tension on your brake line. Alright, I'm going to come down and out to the front. Just taking my time here. Not pulling on any of these lines too hard. Just working it over, working it out. Just take your time. Be patient with it, and you'll get her out of there without doing any damage. There's your old strut. And the reason I was saying earlier you don't touch this, if you take this loose, this spring is going to expand at a rapid rate. And when it's in here, if you take it loose there, it's going to shoot that bottom down, and it could cut hoses. It could do a lot of damage. Here's our new strut assembly. And what we're going to do, and I learned it over there on the other one, you want to clean this up real good, which this feels real good and clean right here. This is going to go in with this and this pointing to the rear. This right here is what that bolt that we took out, that's what it runs through. That's what locks this strut into the knuckle, the bolt going through that. So pay attention to how you put it in. It's got to go in like that, okay? So step one, take all three of these off, lay them up here where you can grab them, because you're going to need them. And you're going to need them quick because this thing's heavy. I'll tell you what I'm going to do before we put that in. I'm going to go ahead and take this off down here at the bottom and replace it with the new metal one. So let me get that going. It's 18 millimeter. All right. We're going to loosen this off. There we go. Now this one too can start spinning within the housing. We're going to see. If it does, we'll just put some vice grips on the end, or we'll grab that 8 millimeter. Yep, it's spinning, so I'll take the camera in a minute and get down there real close so they can kind of see what's going on. Let me grab 8 millimeter. That little stud sticking out past it, that's not me. That's what you want to put your 8 millimeter on, because it is actually twisting as I turn the wrench, and it twists into the housing. So that's why it has a way to grab it on the end. So that's what I'm fixing to do now, so I can get that nut on off. The 8 is on the end, and I have my 18 there, and the 8 is bumping up against that, so it holds itself. And I'm going to take that nut on off. I believe she's finger tight now. Yep. Okay, there she is. This whole thing was spinning inside of here. So what I did was hold it with my 8 millimeter, holding this in. It's 8 millimeter right there. And then that stopped this from spinning, and I was able to take the nut on off. We're going to put the new one in while we're down there. These don't matter. It doesn't matter which end you put up or down. It turns out the same. If I go in like this is pointing that way. If I flip this over and go in like this is pointing the way it needs to. So I'm just going to insert it back in. Start the nut. These, you don't have to hold anything. They'll tighten up without that. Just tighten it. Guten Tag. German torque. Guten Tag. Go ahead and take this nut off. And let's just lay that right there. You guys tell me where I put it because I'll forget. Okay, now back to where we were. So keeping our lines in mind and remembering we came out this way and we're going to go back in that way. Also remember to keep this toward the rear. If you'll look right here, this thing slides right down in there. Then the bolt goes through and that's what locks her in. All right, these are going to be pretty tight going back in, so I'm going to put a little grease on it to help. I'm also going to put a little grease inside of this knuckle just to help with it sliding back in. If you'll remember before, we went out of these wires here this way, so I'm going to go back in just like we came out. What a pain in the rear. All right, now I'm going to make sure my brackets are to the rear. Now the fun part, I'm going to reach down in here and grab that bolt that's on the top, and it's going to kind of help me guide. I can get one of them through and get a nut started. Now I can relax a minute and make sure I got the right one in. Yeah, I did. Everything's facing the rear. So now I can put these other ones on. Okay. Whew. Okay. Now we got our line back up. Just need to try to get her started in. Okay. At this point, there's no hope in getting the top of this linkage back in. We're going to have to raise up on it, but don't worry about that right now. That'll be okay. I'm going to get my jack under there and see if we can start raising it up and getting the strut to actually go down in the knuckle. I'm putting it right under where that knuckle bolt's on. There's a bolt sticking out. I'm centering that bolt on the jack. I'm putting the pressure to it. Now, I'm going to take a hammer, move all your hoses out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and just tap this over. I got it lined up pretty good. Now I'm going to go underneath and tighten the subframe bolts back up. And that's going to help pull this back up as well and help get everything back in proper alignment. And then we should be able to finish trying to get that strut on down into the knuckle. Like that. Did you see it raising up? All right. That's got our subframe back up where it belongs. Torqued down good. So now we're going to fight this bear again. All right, so we got our tab lined up with the little split in the knuckle. We're fixing to put some upward pressure on this. I went ahead and tightened these down, these three up here, to hold this good and steady, as steady as it can. Now we're just going to slide this knuckle up, I hope. All right, I'm going to tap on it. Seems to help. Ah. I think that's it. got that back in. A little aggravating. Now we're going to put our nut back on it. Just going to tighten this down. All right. All right, we're going to put the brake line back on. This brake line has a little thing that goes in a hole that's on that bracket on the back of the strut. And then that'll help you line up the actual hole that the 10mm bolt goes in. Just like that. Let's got her back into place. Now we're just going to slide this clip back on. And then just adjust this around to where you don't have any tension or any possible rubbing of the wire. It's got a coating there, a protective cover. Just put it like that right there, should be fine. So now we've got our 3 tightened up here. We've got the sway bar link tightened up. We've got our knuckle tightened up. We've got our brake line tightened back. And we've got our ABS line mounted back. So that's it. It's not easy, but it's not super hard. You will struggle with some areas, but if I can do it, anybody can do it. Anyway, I hope this helps somebody. I'm gonna get these tires put back on, carry this thing for a test drive, and see if it falls apart. Anyway, give me a thumbs up if you like this, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate you folks. We'll see you next time.